Right, the ANC did well in this week's by-election, securing control over the city of Johannesburg with its coalition partners. The party picked up 6 wards and lost 2 for a net gain of 4, even picking up some wards that it lost in 2016. But is this a reflection of what may unfold in the local government elections next year? Let's get a forecast now from Professor Jaap, Visser, director of the Dula Omar Institute at the University of the Western Cape. Professor, thank you very much for joining us here on eNCA. Now, you've written a lot of books on local government law. Do the results of this week's by-elections tell us anything about how things are likely to unfold next year?
Good morning, Masego. Thanks for having me. It's always difficult to predict local government elections, and predictions is not my strongest feat, but it's also good to note that by-elections are always quite localized. The outcome is always very localized. The turnout is usually quite low, and often by-elections are the result of very localized problems with a particular council or a particular community. So it's difficult to draw trends from it, but it does tell us something about what may happen next year. The one thing that it tells us is that the ANC has consolidated its position in local government. It has generally retained many of the wards that it contested, and as you pointed out, done well in City of Johannesburg and generally had a good showing throughout the country. The opposition fragmented. DA, of course, lost quite a lot of wards. And smaller parties gained from that. The IFP, the Patriotic Alliance, Al Jama, and the Freedom Front Plus were some newcomers, but also some established small parties that gained traction in these elections. And that's going to be interesting going forward to see how this will play into issues such as the role of smaller parties, independents, local parties, kingmakers in coalitions. Maybe we see more coalitions where these smaller parties become the kingmakers. So that's going to be quite a dynamic field to watch next year. And another interesting point that we saw in these elections is that there was 2 municipalities where there was a slightly different election in the Northern Cape, Polokwane and Renosterberg, where the entire council was fired by the province. So the province was exasperated with the inability of these councils to function, fired all the councillors and held a full-on election. We see that in those 2 municipalities, the outcome is not very different from the outcome that we had in the previous elections. So in other words, the entire council was fired, but the voters don't seem to punish political parties for that. There may be different individuals that have come in, but the instrument of dissolution of municipalities, which obviously the Gauteng government tried in Tshwane, that was stopped by the court, it doesn't necessarily seem to result in an entirely different political makeup of the council when that dissolved council is re-elected for.
Prof, when you talk about, people re-electing council that was previously fired for wrongdoing, there's a lot of, for instance, corruption that happens on the municipal level. So how important are by-elections really? Should South Africans take them more seriously as they do the national and local government elections?
Well, of course, I study local government, so I always will give it up for local government and the importance of local government in the elections. These by-elections are very important, and obviously it's the only sphere of government, the only level of government where we do have by-elections, because with national, provincial, we don't have those. We have only elections once every 5 years. With local government, you have by-elections whenever there's a ward councillor that is that falls away for one reason or another. He or she crosses the floor, resigns, passes away. And that's a good thermometer for the municipality to see what voters think at the local level of the performance of that municipality. You will always have a slightly lower turnout. I think that's inevitable. But these by-elections are critically important for holding local government to account, not just at the general elections, but midterm as well.
Now, let's go back to discussing a little bit more about the DA. I know you can't necessarily give too much comment on this, but was their performance in the by-elections a reflection on how people perhaps feel about the new leadership of that party?
It's difficult to say. As I said, these elections, by-elections, are quite localized. They're the result of local conflicts, local issues, dynamics in a ward, councillors that are at odds with their community or at odds with their party. So difficult to pull general trends from it, but I do think it says something about how the party is faring in general, and what is the internal ructions within the party, within its branches or its internal structures. And I think it's very hard not to come to some sort of conclusion that this is a reflection of how the DA is faring and what the voters are making of how it portrays itself in the public domain, and the leadership that it has chosen to elect for itself.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Professor Jaap de Visser, Director of the Dula Omar Institute at the University of the Western Cape.